Now, I know, don't stress, but this is the other half of your grade. Um, and this is the data analysis project, and I suspect we will not take the whole hour, but we'll probably end at like quarter till or so. And then I'll leave, or maybe even before that, and we'll just leave time for chatting and questions and so on. But this is a bunch of information about how to think about how to set up your data analysis project. So basically, if you, sorry, I'm gonna have to keep popping back and forth here. If you look at the syllabus, what we're going to do is not propose this today. This is, I guess I should say, write this better. Describe social computing project. And what we're going to do is talk a lot about different data sets and kinds of things to do. I also want to point out I added this link. So if you haven't been to this document recently, we're going to take a look at that in just a second. Now, scheduling-wise, this is this week. We're April 7th. May 12th. So in about a month, we're going to do a check-in. So between, what I'd ideally like is between now and the next class, which is in 2 weeks, that you contact me and say, and I'll send out a reminder to everybody, but you contact me and say, this is what I want to do for my project. Is that okay? Okay. So we've got 2 weeks before you send that, and then another 2 weeks after that, we'll do this check-in. And so we'll spend this amount of time actually looking at where, talking about where people are at and so on. And we'll combine this with a sort of overview of how to do opinion mining and sentiment analysis. Now, I always feel bad about this because a lot of the mechanisms you need in order to do this kind of analysis are in the second half of the class. But you're smart, you'll figure it out, and I'm here to help you. Okay, so let's go back to the data analysis stuff here. And let's talk about this. So the project is going to be some analysis of how people behave in social groups online. Okay, and this whole next 40 minutes or so are about what makes a good project for this. Now, I know you have, as students, you have variable skills in your graphing capability or your programming capability or your statistical package analysis capability. Doesn't matter. You can get a great grade by just using Excel or whatever, right? You know, what I'm interested in, really, is your ability to work through the problem. Try to both get the data, find an interesting question to ask about that data, do the analysis, and come up with some kind of interesting result. Okay? So here's what makes a good project for this class. Okay? First off, you need to provide, when you present, we're going to do something on the very last day of class. I'll be there, and we'll do another presentation. Again, I will give you the sort of template for it. And again, you'll have a few more minutes to talk about it. And basically, you're going to say what's interesting about this data set, what I did to do the manipulation, do the analysis, and hey, what I found out. Now, if you take a data set and don't find anything interesting, you know, I won't dock you for it, but that seems incredibly unlikely. Almost every data set I look at, I find something interesting in. And it will be bad if you look at a data set that I have already analyzed and I found something interesting and you didn't. See what I mean? So what you want to do is, in a minute we'll look at a bunch of different possible data sets, some that are huge, some that are small. There's a million different opportunities here. But basically we want you to take this data set, do whatever kind of analysis you do, and find the result. Ideally something that's not totally obvious. Now, here's the big gotcha about doing data and analytics like this. Once upon a time, when I was young, you used to go out and collect your data, you'd do a little bit of cleaning, and you'd spend about the same amount of time doing analysis. Now, the relationship is more like this. It's more like you spend a little bit of time cleaning and you spend a lot of time analyzing. Now, the truth is that sometimes you will spend, in fact, this is true for my work, I spend a huge amount of time collecting data and cleaning it. Probably, in fact, it's the opposite of the graph you see here. The difference for you as students is that I'm giving you data sets that are kind of already collected and kind of clean. You won't have to do much work on this. However, pay attention. When you go out into the real world, this will be the opposite. I'm just saying, I spend easily half of my time, 50% of my time in all my analytics work, just cleaning the damn data. It just takes forever. And there have been projects where 75 to 80% of the time is cleaning, 20% of the time is analysis. And in one data set, we collected data from, I think it was 2,000 people. We spent a person year cleaning that data. Yeah. Imagine one person coming in for 8 hours and working on that data set just to clean it. Oh, it's just true. That's the way it works. Okay, now, one of the things to be thinking about as you plan out your project is to think about the kinds of things that interest you, what kinds of things you want to find. So what you want to do is this little back and forth between the things that you're interested in versus the kind of data you have and the kind of analytic methods you know how to do. So for instance, what is this? This is a social network diagram. Do you know how to make something like that? Do you understand what those relationships are? What does something like that represent? I will tell you, this is showing the branching factor between certain groups, certain individuals, and then you have these red terminals, which represent a particular subpopulation of that. So it's showing something very interesting to the person who designed it. But for you, think about, what's your data? What does the data look like? Big clue, it's going to be a big table, okay? So you're going to have this giant data table. What are the relationships between them? How do you understand relationships? For example, if you get a data table, how do you extract the strong ties between elements of that table? How do you represent it? How can you find those relationships, and how do you display it at the end? Because ultimately, what most people mostly do is they do some kind of analysis. So you get a data table and you say, well, how do I measure the importance? So each row may represent, for example, in your table, it may represent one Facebook message, okay? A directed Facebook message. And you want to somehow say, measure the importance of that. How would you do that exactly? So this is the kind of thing you have to think through. If you're going to measure importance, you have to understand how do you define importance. For example, you could do, and I'm just spinning out ideas here, so just write down whatever interests you. One thing you could do is a Luke analysis, LIWC. LIWC is the name of a linguistics analysis tool. It's freeware, so you can just go get it. And it gives you a sentiment analysis and a bunch of other things. So for example, you could use Luke to do something very much like we saw with I Feel Fine. Remember that? By Jonathan Harrison and Sepp Kamvar. They used their own tool that they built because they build stuff like that. But you could go and grab an off-the-shelf tool to measure sentiment and then start to plot sentiment over time, or sentiment correlated with weather, or sentiment correlated with number of people posting and reposting, whatever. You can also do measures of prestige. So for example, measuring strong tie. Again, if you're going to take a data set like, say, a Twitter stream, then you have to figure out how to measure that. So these analysis tasks are all the things you have to think about. So for example, let's go down here. Motifs, right? What if we look at a Twitter stream, say 1,000 tweets back and forth on some particular topic, how do you algorithmically determine the motif or the theme or whatever it is? And then lastly, one of the things you'll have to think about is, I've got this data, I've analyzed it, I've created some new rows or new columns or something in my table. How do I visualize that? Now, here's the good news. Like I said, you can do, there are many, many different kinds of things you can do. And at this point in our, the life of computer science, there's freeware for everything. So for example, here's a social network analysis of different people publishing on different topics. You see those links? What are these? These are bridges, right? This analysis is finding bridges between different topic areas. So in this particular case, how would you do this? So I will tell you, what they did is they took a collection of papers from a conference. In this case, I think it's 200 papers or whatever the number is. And they then they had each of those papers, they wrote a piece of code that identified the topic area, the key topic area, say structure of RNA, statistical physics, mathematical ecology, so on, right? They then created this linkage looking at co-author relationships. That is, if you look down here at yellow for structure of RNA, there's one author who wrote this paper who's on the topic this, who has also co-authored a paper with the person who wrote that paper. Okay? So there's a co-author here. I guess that would be nice to have that name there. But it'd be not, this is actually a person who's a bridge between people who do RNA studies and people who do statistical physics. Get it? Okay. So once you create this table, you've written the code to do the analysis. And again, this doesn't have to be hard. I've seen people do this kind of work in a spreadsheet using very simple, say, term count functions over the, say, the text of the abstract. It doesn't have to be impossibly hard. But once you do that, you create this, and then they just pour this into a graph layout package, and then they got this basically for free. Okay? So one category of this kind of social analysis you might want to do are these node link models, these graphs we've been talking about. So, for example, one kind of analysis you might compute is the degree of centrality. If you, for example, one of the data sets we have is, we'll talk about in just a minute, is a collection of papers from a conference. If you make connections between the papers, say by co-citations, there will be some papers that get cited by everybody, super central to the field. That's the way the paper we were just talking about is. That's the I can't say his name, Granovetervin paper. That's a super central paper, right? So you can compute that by doing co-citations or co-authorship or whatever. You also may want to, for example, compute how close a node is to other nodes. Say term overlap between the abstracts or titles or something. Or if you want to be really clever, lots of papers have category numbers in them. So for example, in the ACM conference papers always have a category identifier, H.321.20.2. And so that's just a topic. H is, I think, human-computer interaction. 20 is the sub-area of interactive designs. Sub-area for that is, whatever, right? So you can actually use those numbers as a way to compute between this, right? You might want to compute other things like bibliometric analysis or path length or whatever. So here are just some examples, right? These are two different projects done by different people. The one on the left is looking at 3 different communities, and well, I guess what I should say is it's 3 different communities that emerged from this analysis. And again, this is what you're seeing are the green guys, which actually break into 2 sub-areas, and then the yellow guys, which have a more consistent relationship. And then the red papers are written by people, and they're on top of everything. They're absolutely everywhere. That was an unexpected finding, right? On the other hand, this is relationships between different people in a department. So what you're seeing here, this giant connected thing, is that there are rings and then there are sub-branches. And so this is who knows who. So these people are all connected. It's sort of odd. And then you get these little tiny sort of forest of subtrees. And so there's a really sad tree down here with just 2 people in it. They're not connected to anybody. I'm sorry. But you never know. So here's an interesting analysis of publications of these 2 different groups, the MIT group versus Stanford. What strikes you about this, right? So again, these were computed by looking at the papers that come out of the computer science department at Stanford. So this is co-authorship. So there's a bunch of papers here in the middle that are all mutually co-authored by people who work in related areas. And then when you get out here, you start to see these branching areas. This is funny because this is actually not, you see this long line right here? That's an artifact. What you're really seeing, though, are these sub-branches. So one guy breaks off and starts writing with all these people who then write with those people who write with each other and so on. Whereas the MIT has fewer branching out. What this suggests is the centrality of topic at MIT versus Stanford. Stanford spins out more areas than MIT. So this is the kind of analysis you could do if you wanted. Now, I include this one totally because it's a hand-drawn, laboriously collected sociogram. Remember I talked about sociograms earlier. This is who knows who. And this is all collected by hand. So this is actually showing the strong ties between people who've written papers. And this was done, like, I think in the 40s or 50s. But what you're seeing here are there are some people who are very, very central. And a lot of these are, an interesting topic. So you could do this, if you wanted to actually, you can't figure out how to make R work or something. If you want to do something like that, that would be okay too. But make sure you talk to them first. Because this is really, informatics department, so we should be doing stuff online. Okay, so here are 2 links, okay? I think that's, yeah. So let's go look at these 2 documents. So the reflections, now remember this? This is our reflection document. And so what I've been doing is putting sort of a few notes in here. I just want to remind you that this document is here, and it's linked off of the syllabus page, okay? So here are a couple of papers. I'm just going to keep adding papers down here that I think are really interesting, and they might motivate you with an idea. So for example, Steve Grove, who turns out to be a Googler, is a friend of mine, wrote this really interesting article about the rhythm of food searches. Now remember we talked about rhythm of email? Yeah, well there's a rhythm of food searches, which sounds crazy, but wait a second. When do people do food searches? Well, before they eat. that tends to be very rhythmic, right? So you'll see there's a particular interesting analysis. Now remember also, we talked about Google Trends earlier, a couple of classes ago. You can use that as a data source too. But you can go look, for example, at Seth Davidson article from a couple of weeks ago and see how he does that, how he downloads the data and so on. And then there's also an interesting, inspiring article here by Rui on how Twitter responds to comments from other people. I will tell you the punchline for that is large companies respond to complaints on social media when the complainer has a large social network. But what's interesting about that article is that they talk about how to do that analysis. So that's basically laying out a thing to you. So now let's go over here to the real point of today, which is this article here. This is the interesting data source. You can get there. Oh, I see a lot of people are there already. You can get there from this link right here in the slides. It's also linked off of the syllabus page as well. But this is a whole pile of different. Let me switch this a little bit. Okay. So what this is a bunch of links to a bunch of different resources. I'll skim through these quickly, and then we'll leave some time for questions. There's a bunch of word stuff here. You can read that, but it's fascinating to see all kinds of analysis that you can do here with children and vocabulary. So if you're interested in how kids learn languages, this is the thing to go with. Also note, if you're an R person, they have an R package that goes with this. So if you don't want to sort of figure out how to unpack the data schema, that might be more effective. This is a totally random thing. I ran across this the other day and I put it in here. This is a 10 years worth of checked out books from the Seattle Public Library. Like, I never believed they would have released this. But possible topic here, are there books that tend to be checked out together, or are books that are never checked out together, or are there patterns and pulses and rhythms to these kinds of things? Um, this is actually, let's just go look at this. Here's a whole bunch. I didn't even try to organize this. This is a whole pile of different data sets. So, for example, if you're really interested in maternity leave policies, there you go. Oh, this is a really funny one. When planes attack, yeah, unbelievably, the FAA, the big federal aviation government thing, has this wildlife strike database. I mean, this is just sort of funny. I'm not sure this is particularly great for social computing, but anyway, it's just sort of interesting. I encourage you, if you're looking for sort of variety in this, you might find something interesting here. So, for example, I'm just scanning through this really quickly. There was one down here that I thought was interesting. I lost it. Anyway, that's a total ton of stuff, and it's this link right here, so you can look there. Facebook has a bunch of data sets. These ProPublica articles are articles about analyses that people have done, and they almost all have links to the data set itself. So you can take a look at those ones. Stanford has a giant data set about social networks. Go check that one out. Again, these are just, so in this half page right here are probably 1,000 different data sets. What I encourage you to do is to look through the different space of possibilities and see what really interests you. I mean, I've given you the whole world here. Another kind of world is that I have a couple sets of conference papers. So, for example, HCIR is a conference on human-computer interaction and information retrieval, and CHI is the big conference on computer-human interaction. They're both about 100 to 300 papers, and you can go, for example, look at co-citations, or you can do whatever you like within that. So you just scrape that and do that. There's a Pew data set, Environmental Protection Agency things. So if you want to see, for example, you can find people who've applied together and worked together over time. A more general thing is, this is sort of an interesting, fun article. It probably doesn't belong here because it's just a screed about how difficult it is to find data on a page which has a zillion data sets. If you're interested in doing some work with Amazon, Amazon's got a bunch of data sets. If you want to roll your own or do your own data scraping, here are a bunch of different data scraping tools. You don't have to scrape if you, for example, go to the Enron data set. I've mentioned this to you before, but this is a big data set which is all emails from this company just before and during the time it collapsed. So this is a perfect and actually a fairly straightforward data set to analyze if you're looking for cohorts of people who send emails to each other frequently or not frequently. So there's a bunch of analysis you could do there, which would be pretty straightforward. Especially, I've analyzed that data set, so I'm just telling you, I know a lot about it. It's interesting to see how that data, how those relationships changed over time. So there's a kind of interesting longitudinal analysis one could do there. Okay, here are some the social computing analysis tools. These are 3 different collections of tools in R for doing different kinds of social network analysis. The first one is to do graphs. It's basically all the R wrappers you need to take it, and some nice examples. It actually walks you pretty straightforward through how to create a social graph in R. So, for example, an easy thing to do would be to take this Enron data set and then read this story here on graph handling in R. Do a little bit of extraction from the Enron data set to figure out who the players are, who the nodes are, and then just graph it out in R and see what you can find there. Okay? So that's basically this bottom recommendation here. That's one data set and one particular thing to think about. You could, for example, look on Twitter and look at hashtag changes over time. Same thing for Instagram. You might look, for example, at emergent communities. There's one called Booktagram that I just learned about, which apparently is gigantic. It'd be interesting to find that kind of stuff, or how hashtags vary by country. So, for example, there's a lot of hashtags in English that probably don't appear in German, and vice versa. Or are there ones that actually interlock between the languages that have the same references but use different hashtags? That would be an interesting kind of thing to study. Whew. That's a lot of stuff. Anyway, I wanted to give a little bit of time just to have open questions. Let me make sure I didn't skip anything. Yeah, let's just talk about this last one, and then we'll leave time at the end for discussion. So, reminder, that's my email. Please feel free to ask me anything. But in particular, I will send you a prompt in the next week, probably on Monday. We'll send you a prompt saying, please send me your description of the analysis project you want to do. And so I expect that this project between now and the end of the course, which is June 2nd, that this will probably take you about 20 hours, which is about 2 or 3 hours a week. So caution, 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 caution. Do not try to do this in the last week. It's not a good thing to do. So make sure you space out the amount of work you need between now and the end of the term. Okay? So, last thing I'll say, and then we'll open it up for questions. Our next class is in 2 weeks. Guess what? I'll be updating the reflections document. I'll be answering emails. By then, you should have figured out what your project will be, and you should have a confirmation note from me in that amount of time, between now and the 28th. And then on the 28th, we'll get together and we'll be talking through these papers, which are really interesting. And like I said, these papers actually talk a lot about social network analysis. But if this interests you, you'll be fascinated by these topics. Okay. So that's what I've got to say. Questions? Thoughts? Yeah, I know, it's kind of a lot to take in, right? I can see somebody's hand way in the back. Go for it. No, I could barely hear you. Say it again. Stand up. Yeah. Yes, yes. Come talk to me. I'm lonely. Truth is, I'm sitting in a conference room somewhere in the Googleplex, and there's nobody here. It's like, 8 o'clock in the morning. So, I'm glad you're keeping me company. Question?
Do we have to write a paper too, or just make a presentation?
Oh, good question. Thank you for asking. No, we're going to do another presentation format like we did before, and you'll have to present it. However, a really smart thing to do in order to organize your thoughts, because you won't have much time, it would be to write a 1 or 2 page summary. And if that was then submitted with it, that would not be bad. Not technically required, but a good thing. Okay?
We can't hear what you're saying.
Oh, you couldn't. You do not have to write a paper. We will do a presentation like we did in the design exercise. But writing a 1-page sort of summary or a 2-page summary is a really good thing. Can you hear? Did you understand that?
Yeah.
Okay, good. Okay, sure.
Okay. So questions from the audience.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for being my translator.
How long do the presentations have to be, and can we do them in groups? groups like the other project.
Groups. Oh. Yeah, I'm thinking about it. I'm thinking about it. Yeah, but, well, let me ask you, since I can see most of you here, did you enjoy working in the small groups? Was it good? Raise your hand if you liked it. Okay, yes. The answer is yes. Everybody loves it. Okay, yes. The answer is yes. So I will. Let me update. So working groups. Yes. So we'll do the same thing as last time. If you have n people in your group, you will have n times x, whatever the number of minutes is, depending on the number of groups. But yes, I think that's a great idea. So if, for example, you have somebody who's a great visual designer, graphic designer. Oh, actually, sorry. There. Hi. It just occurred to me. You probably don't want to see yourself. If you have somebody in your group who's a great, say, visual designer, loves to do graphics and so on, and you have somebody who's a great R programmer and somebody who's a great, thinker, by all means, go for it. Just let me know, and when I send out the message, I'll ask for who wants to be in that group. Also, I guess I will give you also the option of being in a group, and then if you want to break up with your group, you can do that too. But remember, then you have to do the whole project yourself.
And do you know already how long the presentations are?
No, not yet. I want to see what the projects are, and so I will let you know once we get the suggested projects from people. Once I hear from you what kinds of things you want to do, then I'll let you know. But it's not going to be 30 minutes, right? Just because there's so many people in the class, it will probably be on the order of 5 minutes kind of thing. So again, I don't want to hear the whole history of data analysis back to Aristotle. I want to know what data you got, how you collected it and transformed it, what analysis you did, and if you're interested, what kind of hypothesis you had going in, and then what the surprising result was. Just those 5 things. I will write this all up for you.
What data and what we did with it, and then what hypothesis was. I think there's. Can you do a quick summary of what you just said, because the quality was not that good?
Oh, sorry. Well, yes, I will. But before I do that, was the audio quality pretty good for most of the talk?
Yeah.
Oh no. I'm not. See, I have my microphone here. I actually put on the microphone for you guys. I thought that would make things better.
It's more laggy than the quality.
Yeah. Yes. So let me summarize it. I'll speak slowly so it'll be more understandable, I hope. In your presentation, I will send out an email about this, but in your presentation, what I'm looking for is what your data set is, how you collected it and transformed it, what your hypothesis about the data was, what your result was. Okay? So that could be 4 slides. And so it might be, and slide 1 would be, I use the Enron data set. Here's the link. The slide 2, right? That would be very simple. And then slide 2 would be, I transformed it using this package, or I looked for whatever. And so, for example, I analyzed, I extracted all the email addresses from Enron, put them in a giant data table, and I computed all the connections between different email addresses. Something like that. But I will send you a note about this.
Perfect.
Okay?
I think we good. Thank you.
Okay, is that it?
Yeah.
Very good. I will see you all in 2 weeks. Thank you so much, and thank you for putting up with the poor sound quality.
Thank you.
Cheers.
Bye.
Bye bye. Have a good weekend.